it's time to do something big. It's time to do something bold.
To have a bold idea, bigger than anyone is comfortable with.
And I've worked my whole career for a moment like this.
Do you think we can? Well, yeah, if we really, really want to.
Yes, we can.
This is the power of major philanthropy. This really works.
This evening, Anna and I want to share with you a dream.
Well, change is driven by people that are utterly devoted to a cause that they're passionate about. We call them social entrepreneurs. They're inspirers, persuaders, change makers, and they are heroes.
We won't be investing in shares to make money. We will be investing in dreams to make change. This right now is the official start of the Audacious project.
Good morning. Did you know that there are harmful chemicals and contaminants in your home right now? That there are, and that these chemicals and contaminants are a major source of the contributor and the root cause of chronic disease and the health conditions that you're experiencing. And to protect you and your family from long-term consequences of daily exposure to these harmful chemicals and contaminants, you need a plan. And until we decide to wake up and take a serious look at the root causes of chronic disease, your children, your parents, our pets are going to continue to suffer. Hi, I'm G.B. Arnold. And I'm the founder of Einstein Mothers. And over 11 years ago, I set out on this epic quest to solve what I call the Audacious Challenge. And in that 11 years, I invested 70,000 hours, roughly a 40-year career shoved into an 11-year box to discover and develop a comprehensive and scalable solution to the underlying root causes of chronic disease. Einstein Mothers' goal every single day is to teach mothers and caretakers just like you, to teach you how to protect and restore the health of your children, your parents, and your pets from the ravages of chronic disease. But that's not all. You know, in that undertaking, the Einstein Mothers plan will also save you an absolute fortune in the pharmaceutical drugs that we are currently taking to treat the symptoms of our chronic disease. And in addition to the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, it will also save you a lifetime of horrible and debilitating side effects from those same drugs. Einstein Mothers' Family Longevity Plan is based on 5 core pillars of health: air and breath, water and hydration, the microbiome and the fuel, to fuel the biome, energy, the fire element, and the importance of movement. And then the 5th element is the frequency. It's the space element. It's also the element of mindfulness and of awareness. So as I continue to learn how to solo produce a live stream, thank you for your patience, because it's a lot going on and it's sometimes challenging to figure out all the pieces to make this thing work. So the balance of the 5 elements is an essential component to protect and restore the health of your entire family. So beginning next Monday, we'll begin to take a deep dive into each of the 5 elements, starting with air and breath. Air quality turns out to be the 6th leading cause of death worldwide. I mean, you can imagine that. And here in America, asthma is the #1 childhood chronic disease. So by starting with the air and breathing techniques, we will have the greatest impact on people's health outcome. I've got a number of friends who are suffering from a wide range of chronic respiratory diseases, including my mother. And so beginning with air and breath, I believe, is the quickest path to get the results of improved health outcome. It's the easiest element to work with, and it's also the least expensive. So we'll begin with air and breath. Also as a salute to my father, who inspired me to embark on this 30-year career to end chronic disease. It was in 1994 that I was living in Berlin, Germany, when I got a call from my mother, and she said, "Son, your father's in the hospital. In fact, he's in the ICU. He's having trouble breathing, and the doctors don't think he has long to live." Well, in addition to being freaked out that my father was about to die, I made the decision to pack up my belongings and to return home, to either bury my father and or to help him get better. It was in the wildfires of 1994, the Mexican wildfires of 1994, that really triggered his respiratory emergency. And so that's what landed him in the hospital. But, you know, on a side note, looking back then, my father, the wildfires of Mexico of 1994, while it was bad on the air quality here in Houston, it was nothing compared to what we're seeing in the Midwest and the Northeast from the Canadian wildfires here in 2023, right? And so the day that I got home was the day that my father got out of the ICU. And I had the privilege of working with my father for 4 years. And we started with working in his diet. Part of the idea was if we could help to eliminate his extra large belly that he had been working on for a number of years, that maybe we could help to improve his breathing conditions. So that was our focus, you know, kind of the standard go-to that everybody goes to whenever we're dealing with a health outcome. It's always diet, right? Diet, supplementation, and exercise. And that's been an old model that's been in use for a long time. And, you know, I think nutrition is important, supplementation is important, but I think it has a limited ability, especially to resolve chronic diseases, and especially if they're late-stage chronic diseases. If you've been living with them for quite some time, diet, exercise alone is not going to be sufficient. And so, you know, when my father and I made progress in his diet, it just didn't resolve the issues that he was facing, and it didn't really improve his breathing condition. We never really got rid of his belly. We never got to engage his breathing muscles, the diaphragm, the intercostal muscles that could help him to restore his breathing. So, you know, to watch him suffer for 4 years, it was horrible. It was a horrible experience to here's a, you know, someone you love, somebody in your family suffering from this. I mean, he was living from the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. I mean, he called his oxygen machine his ball and chain. And so sadly, I mean, I watched him suffer untold levels of pain and misery. He used to get cluster headaches and sit at the kitchen table. He described these headaches as being like shoving an ice pick into his eye, into the center of his brain, and he would just be there in agony. So tough experience. And it wasn't, you know, so I did massage therapy, did a number of things that I think provided some help and some relief for him. But at the end of the day, he had gone too far, stayed too long, and chronic disease needs to be addressed immediately, and looking at the solutions. So it wasn't, you know, I think it was in May of 1998 that he finally ended up back in the hospital, and we gathered together, family gathered together to wish him farewell. And yeah, tough experience to watch someone that you love die a slow and horrible death. In this case, suffocation. He suffocated to death, you know, after 4 years. And so that experience for me was, it was life-changing. It inspired me, you know, I remember, like, I never want to see anybody have to suffer through this. The individual suffering, and then the families that have to endure watching their loved ones suffering. I don't know which is worse. Not to mention the financial burden that the healthcare system today is exacting on Americans across the country. I mean, it's a broken system. you know, and it has led to more, you know, medical bankruptcies than I you know, could even talk about. And so, you know, looking back over the last 30 years, I mean, I'm often reminded, or I think often about, you know, if I only knew then what I know now, I know I could have radically improved the quality of his life, and I believe I could have extended the quantity, the length of his life as well. And again, it's not enough to have knowledge or even understanding. You know, you have to have a willingness and a desire to make the changes. You know, that was kind of the premise of to end chronic disease in America. You don't start with the oldest among us and try to get them to make the changes they need. You know, you begin with those individuals that are, you know, the youngest among us. And as we begin with the youngest among us, and we can begin to prevent chronic disease from ever happening, that's how we eradicate chronic disease in America. So again, that's the premise. Working with the youngest among us, our children. And it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, who wants to see your children suffer from a chronic disease? And you know, these are chronic for their entire life. So not only are they in pain and misery, but they're also living a shorter life as well. Maybe they may grow out of it, but there's a good chance that they're not. They won't come out of it, right? So you know, so I had this idea that you know, that we could do something about it. That I think, you know, armed with the right knowledge, armed with the right understanding of this knowledge, that would lead us to taking wise action. So as I continue to figure out how to live stream and have a conversation, this is one of the most challenging things I've done. So thank you for your patience. But you know, over the years, I've worked with thousands of clients, health and wellness clients, massage therapy clients. I've worked with yoga students and have helped them to adopt new lifestyle habits, implement new strategies and tactics that have helped them improve the quality of their health, the quality of their life. And so at some point when I had this notion about, you know, to solve chronic disease in America by December 21st, 2035, that it was going to happen through inspiring mothers, teaching mothers, educating mothers, coaching mothers on what they need to know and why it was important for them to know it, and then help them to coach them into implementing the solutions that benefited them and their children, if their parents are living with them, their parents, and also their pets. I mean, the pets benefit from the improvement of these environmental factors that are caused, really, as I believe, and I think as science has suggested, root causes of chronic disease. And you can't get there by, again, diet and exercise. So I've been working over the last, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 months figuring out how do you take a 70,000 hour solution and you put it into a, you know, a 10-minute video, or you know, or in the vernacular of the day, putting it into a 15-second TikTok or short or reel, and to tell a story that is compelling and inspiring, that reaches the audience. And of the 70,000 hours, I know that those of you who've been following me, I mean, this has been a real challenge. The last 500 hours, I would say, that I've invested, of the 70,000 hours I've invested, the last 500 have been the most challenging. To be the camera guy, to be the lighting guy, to be the talent, to be the writer, the editor, the producer, director, it's a lot, especially being off the grid for 11 years. You know, it's kind of like when you're waking up in Oz, right? It's like, Toto, we're no longer in Kansas. This is a whole different world, and things are moving at a speed and a pace that is mind-numbing. And I can understand how and why we all feel overwhelmed, or even the point of depression. I mean, you don't have to look any further than just the amount of screen time that we're contributing to our the screen time is a real key to our mental state and mental health as well. So I wanted to just say that so the goal that I'm working on, or the solution that I'm working on, is to put together a comprehensive and scalable package, taking individuals, mothers, caretakers through a process by which educating you what you need to know of each of the 5 elements. What do you need to know about the quality of air and its corresponding practice of breathing? What do you need to know, and why it's important to know it? And then most importantly, to coach you into implementing the strategies and tactics to see the results. Because it's not enough to know. You have to do. So learning and then doing is the key. Learn, do, learn, do. And so starting with air, I think air is the low-hanging fruit here. And I think it's, sometimes I think we get things backwards. This idea of, the importance of breathing. It's like it's such, it's a gift. It's a free gift, right? It's been around for thousands of years, and now all of a sudden, breath has made a comeback. And it's about time, because breath is like one of those, fundamental operating instructions that if we only knew how to breathe, right, that we would have more energy, we'd have more focus, we'd have more vitality. Some of the stuff that we're all looking for, and that we don't have to get it through caffeine or from another drug or from another, fill in the gap, right? When you can realize, like, your anxiety, maybe just a buildup of CO2. Maybe you just need to figure out how to breathe. Maybe we need to figure out how to do full lung yogic breathing. I mean, I've been teaching breathing for 20 years. It's funny to me that, here in 2023, everybody's a breath guru, right? I'm like, really? I mean, how long have you been doing breath? How long? What, you read a book and now you're a breath expert? Makes me a little bit crazy, but however it gets there, by whatever means you learn, by all means, learn from someone who can teach you the fundamental practices, and then most importantly, practice the practices. Learn it, then do it. And keep doing it. And keep doing it long enough that you can be an expert, and you can then teach other people to do it as well. So I think if we start with breath and we haven't solved the indoor air quality, or if you're not paying attention to what's going on in the outside air quality, then you could be doing more harm than good. So Einstein mothers believe that the very first step as we address the issue of air is we must eliminate the chemicals and the harmful contaminants in our indoor air. What are those? There's the particulate matter, PM10, those are 10 micron particles. And then you've got the PM 2.5, those are the superfine particles that can easily get into the lungs, and those are the ones that could cause damage to the lung tissue and then elicit a chronic disease response, right? Creating chronic inflammation, which results in chronic disease. So we got the particulate matter, then you got the biological elements, fungi and molds and mildew so the biological pieces that are in our house. And if you live here in Texas or in other, especially in the Gulf Coast, if you live anywhere in the Gulf, in the U.S., or high humidity areas, we have designed our building systems that are anti-biological. The moisture that is in the environment is the fuel for the mold, which causes respiratory issues. And so humidity levels, they need to be monitored. They need to be controlled so that we can keep the molds from actually replicating, propagating, which causes a problem. So you get the biological elements. We've got particulate matters, we've got biological elements, and then we get into some of the more nuanced contaminants. These are the semi-volatile organic compounds and the volatile organic compounds. And this is the stuff that comes off of our furniture, our drapes, our carpet, our bedding, our beds, all synthetic fibers. And if you're suffering from any chronic disease, you got to start with your air quality. And so, Einstein and others have developed a very basic 3-step framework that we can put each of the 5 elements through. And the very first element is to teach you how to assess your environment. How do you go through every inch of your house and begin to assess, what you need to eliminate? And then when you figure out what, you eliminate all the things that you can eliminate, and then how do we mitigate what you can eliminate? Because there's some things you're probably not going to be able to pull up your carpet. You may not be able to, get rid of all your furniture and change your bedding. That's expensive. And not everybody can afford to do that. For those of you that can afford to do it, and if you're suffering, and there's 10% of the population, there's 10% of the global population, 700 million citizens of the world that are suffering from multiple chemical sensitivity, and that they're highly sensitive to the smallest amounts of the chemicals that are in the environment that we've created. Again, some of these chemicals it's formaldehyde in the particle boards and the glues, and lots of the material that we build with today are the sources of these elements. And so as we see humidity rising, we also see that liberates the formaldehyde from these furniture and shelving, and you fill in the gap, and next thing you know, we've got an increase in formaldehyde, and then we don't have to look any further. Formaldehyde causes serious respiratory issues, respiratory distress. And so there are strategies that we can employ that helps us to then address these, the things we can't eliminate. There are strategies that we can use to mitigate that. So once we've addressed the water issue, or the air issue, and cleaning up the air and getting rid of the particulate matter, the biological elements, and the chemicals that are there, then we can begin to teach the breathing techniques. And then from there, as we begin to increase our lung capacity, now we begin to see improvement in our mental state and in our physical state. And so starting next week, we're going to be, like I said, doing a deep dive of each of the 5 elements, starting with air. Because if we can begin to address the air issue and then the breathing techniques, I believe we can begin to see a reversal in the symptoms of asthma and other respiratory issues. And I think also we'll begin to see a potential benefit in those that are suffering from neurological disorders as well. Again, just the fact of having the amount of oxygen that turns on the mitochondria, right? That gives us more cellular energy. And so I haven't exactly figured out, it may be a week to week. We may, take each of the elements. Week 1 we'll cover air, week 2 we'll cover water, week 3 we'll cover the earth element, or the microbiome. That's the microbiome is that living part of us that dwells within us. It's the living part that dwells on us, and it's the life that is all around us. And so once you understand and pull back the curtain on the microbiome, it is absolutely fascinating. And you can then begin to understand why Hippocrates' ancient wisdom holds true today. He's a guy that coined the phrase, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be let medicine be thy food." But one of the things that his quotes that I love the most is, "All diseases begin in the gut." And man, when you understand what the microbiome is, and you realize that if your microbiome gets out of whack because you're eating foods that have got chemicals and contaminants, or you're drinking tap water, for example, which has more contaminants. Look, we're going to get to water, but water may be the single greatest source of environmental contaminants that we're exposed to on a regular and daily basis. I think it was even Dr. Huberman, right, who recently had an element on water, talked about the importance of water, the importance of hydration. When we talk about water, we'll also talk about water-soluble nutrients. And he, he's a smart guy. I like Dr. Huberman. But his advice on how to solve the problem, it falls way short. There's so much more about what we need to know about water. And I've invested 2 years I've got about 15 to 20,000 hours invested in understanding water chemistry, water science, and actually how do we eliminate these wide spectrum of chemicals and contaminants in our water supply. And look, anything that we do, any type of filter that we do is better than no filter at all, right? Otherwise, we become the filter. And so to the degree that we can address this, the water that comes into our home, if you don't own the home, then what are your strategies if you live in an apartment or a condominium or a place you can't control the water coming into the building? You know, those are called point of use systems, and that's the, you know, shower filters and the water that underneath our in our kitchens. So how do we address that? And so we'll go into detail about what do you need to know about water, why it's important that you need to know. And I think part of our biggest challenge, and this is what inspired me to come back off the grid, is like we're just lacking the knowledge. We just don't understand what's true and what's not true. We're living in the age of the big lie. And if you've been trying to find solutions to your problems on the internet, good luck. I mean, there are more wellness gurus and longevity gurus out there, and oftentimes motivated to sell you another supplement, another product. So there are good supplements and there are good products, but it's figuring out, having enough knowledge and understanding of science about what works and why it works. And so water is going to be a big part of this, because I think it's the single greatest source of environmental toxins that we're exposed to on a regular, daily, and continual basis. And again, it doesn't matter if you're living in the River Oaks, if you're living in the Fifth Ward, if you're living in Lake Jackson, if you're living in the Woodlands, our tap water is not fit for exposure. It is not fit for human consumption. What do? Water's a bigger challenge. Water's a little more expensive of a challenge. You know, and again, depending on what your budget is, you can solve it all at one time, or you can, start with your drinking water and your shower water. And then from there, as you have it in your budget, then you can put it, install a whole house water filtration system, also known as a point of entry system. But again, we'll break that down. There's a lot to know about water. So, spending a week on air, I think that's going to be helpful. Spending a week on water, spending a week on the earth element, microbiome. And this is the switch. When we start talking about the microbiome, when we start talking about the earth element, it's this idea of in fact, I don't have my book with me here. I just got it today. It's I couldn't find my original copy that I bought back in 2012. It's The Pleasure Trap. And I think this idea that we are so habituated of feeding our cravings, using fuel as a source of solving internal issues, alcohol, drug, all these sort of things to numb our pain. So the switch is going from feeding your cravings to literally fueling your biome. What are the macro, micro, nanonutrients that your biome needs to operate at peak efficiency? Because you get the microbiome turned on. It's a source, 70% plus of your immune system. I think it's higher than, I haven't looked at the microbiome in a while. I need to study that up, make sure that the numbers I give you are current and relevant. But it's a huge number. I think it's like 70% of serotonin is produced in the gut. It doesn't cross a brain blood barrier. But these are the neurochemicals that are responsible for all of these amazing biochemical processes in the body, and it all happens in our gut. And so when we understand that, and then you understand that it's what we eat matters, or what fuel we get matters, and when you get the fuel matters. And so there's I've spent a good 20,000 hours of the 70,000 hours going back and looking at the science and looking at some of my favorite longevity heroes, from Dr. Attia to Huberman to my all-time favorite Dr. Rhonda Patrick. So I think they provide an excellent source of really good, solid science. My favorite, one of my new favorite all-time guys is Chris from what is it? Chompers. I'll have to Chris. Sorry for not remembering your YouTube channel, but excellent science-based information, and I think that's the key. And I think when we get into this sort of world of nutrition and longevity science, you have to have an open mind, knowing that it's a changing landscape. What we believed 10 years ago may not be true today. And if you're still, relying upon information that you learned when you were in high school, I'm here to tell you that it's a whole new world for sure. And like I said, if you probably have your favorite, health guru, and some of you follow on the internet. I mean, some of these guys are huge, and they've got the persona of authority. They've got, they're an osteopath or they're a chiropractor, and of course, again, some of the science that they're sharing may not be grounded in the latest science. And I think when we look at nutrition, I think the tribalism that exists in nutrition may be as fierce and as divisive as the political divide. Why do I say that? Because there's really two, the red and the blue kind of divide. Maybe you throw in independents that are going to, maybe the more brilliant-minded people out there, the independents, right? Who literally are just like, who's doing the right thing? Who's a smart party? I mean, these are the people that they're not married to an ideology. They're married to like what works. Government should be working for people, not against people. And so, but when we get to nutrition, my goodness, how divisive is that? Paleo, keto, carnivore, vegan, vegetarianism. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And once you get entrenched and you've got, I got my science, here it is, and you're not willing to loosen that up. And I'm here today to say, loosen up your tribal position and be open to different perspectives and different science. And that if you decide to make a change, don't throw rocks at the people that you just, the tribe you just left. Or if you're in the tribe, don't throw rocks at the people who just left your tribe. They're not bad people. They just have a different opinion. They're going to try something else, something new, something different. Having that ability to explore. Anyway, so I think that's important. I mean, having really good science. So one of the things that I've done over these last 11 years is curating books and movies and podcasts from super credible sources that tells a story. In fact, I had a book out here I was going to share with you all, and it's right here. I'm again, part of this is forgive me for I'm not, part of this is just I had a script prepared, but I'm not prepared to give you a scripted deal. The script that I've been working on, I'm making progress, but I have not yet found the exact words that I want to share and the emotion that I want to share it in, and to be able to practice it so I can deliver it, it comes from my heart and not necessarily me reading a script. So this is me being impromptu, and so I'm less focused, and then maybe a little bit more meandering of a conversation, but hopefully, I can figure out how to take this long-form content, chop it up, and to pull out these pearls of wisdom, and to turn it into a reel, to turn it into a short. I'm working on that, by the way. Working on figuring out. The last 3 days, I have done an absolute deep dive. I think these are in 3 days, 20-plus hour days. Not really sleeping in the time that I'm in bed because my brain is just on. Of figuring out how do you do thumbnails? What thumbnails work? How do you title your YouTube videos? I mean, how do you get your message in front of the people who need to hear it? So I'm learning a lot about all that, and I don't have it down yet. I mean, it's just I'm like, this is This is day 16 of me going live. This is day 16 of what I call the Audacious Challenge. So I digress. Let me go back and talk about that. You know, one of the perspectives Einstein mothers were looking at is we're really focusing on the environmental factor. It's chemicals in our air, food, and water. It's the electric fields. That's kind of the fire element. I mean, so we talk about fire. We're also looking at energy. Talk about mitochondria. This is sort of the micro inside of us, looking at the individual organelles that are the source of our power, that fuel our bodies and our brains. And why breath is important, since it drives these metabolic processes. It's the fuel, one of the fuels that the mitochondria use to be able to produce the energy currency, ATP. And so, again, fire, the importance of movement, the importance of breathing, the importance of having the right micro nanonutrients on board to get the full benefits of detoxification. We can go on and on and on about each of these, and we will, a week on each of them. And then when we get to the space element, that's when we start talking about the what's called the frequency of our environment that we've created. And I'm here to tell you that may be the single greatest anti-biological element that we're exposed to on a regular daily basis, the frequency of our spaces. If you think about the frequency of nature, it has a frequency. And when we talk about frequency, it's on the electromagnetic spectrum. When I figure out how to do slides and live stream, then of course I'll be able to share with you video representations, so you're not just hearing me talk. But hopefully I'll be able to, at least for now, provide you enough context that you can understand what I'm talking about. So let's take, for example, the frequency of electricity. In America, it operates at 60 hertz. That's 60 up and down sine wave cycles. That's an up and down, 60 of those cycles in a second. Nature operates at a frequency of 7.83 hertz. It's called the Schumann resonance. And so the Schumann resonance has a frequency of nature, 7.83 hertz. And it's not a hard number, it's a range. But if we were going to tie it into a specific number, 7.83, but who's counting, right? What's interesting about the frequency of nature is it also falls into the frequency of alpha brainwaves. And for my biohackers out there and longevity hackers out there, you may be familiar with the alpha brainwave as being the flow state. It's at 4 to 8 hertz, which is right there in that frequency of nature. And to the degree that we can get our brains operating at these frequencies, these lower frequencies, allows us to be in the flow state, you know, to have access to information that's helpful. And then and again, we can then talk about going into lower levels of theta. This is where creativity happens. That's my good friend Dr. Huberman has been reintroduced. I think, you know, a cool concept. Yoga Nidra. For those of you that are in the kind of in the yoga world, you know it as Yoga Nidra. He's coined a new category, which I think is good. It's helpful because anytime we can bridge the gap from a spiritual orientation to more secular, that people that are not spiritually oriented, for example, and are more scientifically oriented, they can still have access to these ancient tools. He calls it deep relaxation. Is it deep rest, no sleep? Deep rest, no sleep. It's kind of funny because I've been playing around with, I've got my own version of that, which again, we may support Dr. Huberman's perspective, but also then share with you Einstein Mother's perspective on what that looks like as well. So all that to say is that we've created an environment in our homes, in our buildings, in our schools that are not particularly pro-biological, right? I mean, they're not conducive for human habitation. And how do we know that? Well, we know that because 6 in 10, this is a new number. I've been working on the old number I've been working on for quite some time that you may have heard me talk about. It's 50% of America, and I've been using the number of 150 million Americans suffering from one or more chronic diseases. Well, I kind of re-updated my number. Turns out it's 6 in 10. 60% of Americans are suffering from one or more chronic diseases. That number, 200 million Americans. Did you hear that? 200 million Americans are suffering from one or more chronic diseases. And when we look at a system that is broken, the medical system, I call it the industrial medical complex, right there with the industrial insurance complex, the industrial agro-pharma petrochemical complex, you know, the drugs complex, it's broken. It is not designed to fix chronic disease. Because chronic disease isn't a lack of some artificial drug. In fact, you know, one of the things I think is important to know is, you know, currently America is spending, I think it's $4.2 trillion. $4.2 trillion. And I every time I use that number, I'm reminded that, you know, I think we're getting used to the idea of a million. I think it's still a bit of a reach to get to the idea of thinking about a billion, but we now hear about enough billionaires that it's not a foreign term. But when we start talking in the number of trillion, these are really, really big numbers. We'll also talk about parts per trillion, which is really, really, really small numbers. And when we start talking about parts per trillion, we're talking about the harm that can be caused from environmental contaminants, chemicals, at the smallest amount that can create cancers and other major disruptions in our body. So, at the end of the day, $4.2 trillion that America is spending on chronic disease, or on healthcare costs. And of that, 90%, or $3.9 trillion a year is spent on treating the symptoms of chronic disease. It's staggering. And oh, by the way, it's growing. Anywhere from, I mean, I think in 20 to 21 or 21 to 22, it you know, in the world of coronavirus, it jumped by 10%. I mean, healthcare costs went up 10%. Boom. The last time I checked, I think it was 23 to or 22 is, I think it's 2.7% increase. But the point is, you can round it about 5% increase in our healthcare spending year over year. So if you're wondering about the $50 trillion riddle that I've been talking about, if you saw for chronic disease over the next 12 years, not that it's going to happen all at one time, but if we can prevent it from happening in our children, by the time we rendezvous with 2035, there will be a smaller population of Americans that are suffering because they have been, you know, mothers have taken wise actions to protect their children, and then hopefully those now, you know, newly educated and trained children can adopt the lifestyles, habits, and patterns that they can maintain for their whole life. That's the premise. That's the goal. So I wanted to get back to the big elements. We're talking about air, water, earth, fire, space. These are the 5 Tibetan Buddhist 5-element model. And I think that works really well in our 5 core pillars of health, happiness, and longevity. So as we begin to address these and looking at it from a environmental lens, sort of an environmental science lens, and that's for the reason I wanted to bring this book up. Hopefully I can show you this book. The solution, let me start here. Clinical environmental medicine is where you start. And this is not This is not in vogue. This is, you're not going to hear any, longevity guru. Huberman just for the first time started talking about air and water. I'm like, okay, brother, come on. You're close. Or at least you're on the right track. Your solutions fall short, but you just, there's only so much we can know, right? But clinical environmental medicine is key to knowing what are the root causes, the things that we're exposing ourselves to, the chemicals in our air, the chemicals in our water, the chemicals in our food, these things called electric fields and magnetic fields, microwave radiation. Oh my, what is all that? How does it work? And once you understand environmental medicine, now you're on track, because then we can, then all of a sudden, as we begin to look at our diet, and then we start looking at exercise, and we look at sleep regimen, and the microbiome regimen, looking at the importance of the frequencies of light and exposure to light and what color light, and all those things are interesting, and they're all nuanced, and they all have an important component. But if we don't solve the chemical issue, all of these may collectively have benefit. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure that it's going to be enough to protect your family. It's not going to be enough to restore the health of your family. It requires all these things. And if you're sick, look, look, at the end of the day, there are two types of people I want to have a conversation with. Those that want to implement strategies to protect your family from getting sick, and that's where you start. But if you're already sick, if your parents or pets or children are sick, then you need immediate action. Don't do what my father did. Don't wait, because if you wait, especially if you're, depending on what condition you're dealing with, there are points of no return where there ain't nothing you can do to reverse the symptoms. Sadly, right? And so, starting next week, I will be sharing real strategies of how to address each of these. What do you need to know about each of the elements? And then the corresponding exercises, breath exercises, the importance of hydration, how much water, when, how do we make sure we get the proper water-soluble nutrients in our water, right? And it's not just what we're drinking, but it's also, in our soups and smoothies and some of the other protocols. We get into the earth element, we start talking about food. That's going to be fun, because at the heart of that was we look at plant medicines. Another book. And again, these are the key, right? Another book. So the two books that really, the underpinning of all the Einstein other teaches, it is, can I get this? Can I do this? I don't know if I can or not. Come to my head, or rotate that here. Okay, I'm not sure if that works or not. I'll keep working on being a book model. But these are the two books. This is it. The principles and practices of phytotherapy, plant therapy, the clinical environmental medicine. So these are the Bibles. These are the textbooks that are essential to the conversation that we're having. It's essential. It's kind of funny. It's kind of like the breathing. All of a sudden everybody became it's funny when I first became a massage therapist. I was number 12,500 in Texas. I was early adopter, and I jumped into the yoga world. There's only 2 Bikram hot yoga studios in the greater Houston area, right? So I was number 3, early adopter. And I was the first guy that jumped from the Bikram world into creating what's called the express hot yoga model, where we took the 90-minute workout, 2 breathing exercises, 26 postures, and shoved it into a 50-minute box, arguably more challenging, more beneficial, allowed people to practice more often, more frequently, but less recovery time, all kinds of stuff. So early adopter. Well, it's kind of funny, next thing you know, everybody's a breathing expert, right? I'm like, well, okay, breathing's been around for a long time. We're just adopting these ancient practices that have been around for thousands of years. So it's about time that, the West is waking up to these things. But it's funny to me that everybody becomes a breathing expert. Well, when we start talking about Phytotherapy, what I'm blown away by and slightly frightened by is how everybody is now a shaman. What? Everybody's a shaman, and they're slinging, you know, medicines, and they are not responsible. I would say a vast majority. I don't want to put a number on it because I think there are good people doing good work, but by and large, I think there's a lot of people who are going to create more problems for this sacred ceremonies than the good they're going to do. The people seeking those experiences are not prepared. Physically with dieta, mentally, having the basic mindfulness and awareness practices that I think are essential to take into those experiences, and then the integration part. And I think the challenge is if you've got a good experience and you don't properly integrate that experience into your life, now you're chasing the experience and you're just looking for, you know, session after session after session. Some of them, the amount of money that people are charging for these experiences make me crazy. Oftentimes, they're not making the medicine. They have no idea where the medicine came from. They have no idea what's the preparation. They have no idea what they're serving. And I think it's dangerous. So I would say, short of having a direct relationship with the person, and you know who they are and what their credentials are and what their training is, I do not recommend go into that lightly. I don't know how I got into plant medicine, except that plant medicine is a critical part of the equation. And we're not talking about just the psychoactive plants, you know, ayahuasca and psilocybin from fungus and cacti and all the other sources of amazing brain support. But it's the plants that do a bunch of other things. Let me see while I'm here. So yeah, I think this is part of this is sharing my library with you, because again, this is part. I mean, maybe it does a couple of things. One, it lets you know that I'm not just reading something off the internet and like, okay, now I'm a shaman, right? I mean, I've been doing plant medicine work since I was 17. I'm 61 now, so you do the math. Yep, I have a wide range of experiences with a wide range of different plant medicines. But when the virus hit back, when I saw that coming, I think what some of the numbers that were coming out of China, it was frightening. I mean, it was right up there with that Spanish flu kind of like, holy moly, you better get your ark prepared because, you know, the storm is coming, right? So the first thing that I did is I went to my, one of my Bibles, Herbal Virals by Stephen Bruner. Unfortunately, Stephen is no longer with us, but he is truly one of the most brilliant-minded people on the planet. I love this man's work, and so this is where I went. And I've been working with these, the herbal virals and the herbal antibiotics for a number of years. And again, these are my Bibles. These are the answers. These are the complex systems, the phytochemicals found in the plants that were developed with us humans, right? And again, ironically, the same plants that were hijacked by the pharmaceutical companies that then took these exquisite plants by themselves, jacked with the formulation to turn it into a pharmaceutical drug, and then, make $1 billion off the drug that was found in the Amazon forest, and a penny doesn't ever go back to the people or to protect the forest from which it came. It's the kind of stuff that makes me crazy, right? I mean, these are the, if we're dealing with enemies, if there's I mean, we're really fighting against titans. You know, the big pharmaceutical companies, the big agrochemical, pharma, petrochemical companies, right? My father worked for Dow Chemical for 35 years. You know, I think he got a gold coin at the end of that time. I think he also suffered from emphysema from his time working at Dow Chemical as well. But there's no causation, lots of correlation for sure. So again, plant medicine is at the heart of our solution. And then, you know, even for those that are even thinking about having some of the more sacred experiences, you've been kicking around the idea. I've had a number of people that have suggested that it would be helpful to know how to prepare physically, mentally, emotionally. You know, one of my favorite stories comes out of the 60s where, you know, people were working with LSD, for example, and, you know, one of the leading, and I forget his name, but one of the, this may be out of Albert Hoffman's book, but one of the leading guys that was taking people on journey, what he would suggest people do is to work with carbogen, kind of a oxygen and carbon dioxide mix. And it's like depending on how they respond to the mixture of those two gases could determine whether or not they would work on that particular experience or not, whether or not he would work with them or not on that. I don't know how I'm getting off on this topic. Interesting topic and conversation, but the point of it is that there's ways to prepare. And if you're tempted to go off and do that, I'm going to recommend, if you're on antidepressants, you're taking any kind of pharmaceutical drugs, if you're suffering from a chronic disease, you really need to prepare your body, your brain. You need to have a meditation practice, a mindfulness practice, and go beyond mindfulness. You need to have an awareness practice. This is a part that I think is missing. Everybody's, it's mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. Like, no. And that's hard. That's half the equation. It's mindfulness and awareness. That is the combination that creates the internal change that we're all looking for. Okay, I've covered a lot of different topics today, and I'm happy to have gone an actual hour. And hopefully, you know, if I go back and as I go back to review this, there will be clips of wisdom that I can pull out and then tell a story. But for now, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those of you that are, you know, still here, still listening, and hopefully seeing my improvement. I've got lots to learn. I'm not there yet. Not even close on day 16 of all this. Not even close. But I'm hopeful as I continue to press on, press forward, continue to go live, to continue to tell the story, to continue to share. Really, up until now, it's like, hi, this is who I am. This is a little bit about me and where I come from. And so here at the early stages, not a lot of people have tuned in. So this is my time to practice. And okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to say this has been a good day. I'll continue to go live and do my best. I missed a couple of days, just a confession and an apology. You know, forgive me for the last 2 days were really tough to try to figure out thumbnails and content strategy and all of that. I mean, at some point, how do you take your message to share it with the world, but then also be able to make enough money to pay for rent next month? You know, pay for the equipment, pay for the support and all the platforms that you need to actually get this done. So if you're out there and you want to support Einstein Mothers, I think I'll be working on setting something up so you can do that. Right now, I don't think there's still some pieces and components that are not in place to do that. So again, another layer of what I'm working on, plus figuring out how to re-engage in email campaigns and all that. There's so much to do. There's so much to learn. Part of it is figuring out how to navigate that process. What's most important right now? And then what's the next most important thing right now? So right now I'm working on just really tightening up the conversation, not having so many tangents. I mean, you saw me just kind of go off, into the wild here. And again, I think it could be helpful, kind of fruitful. You at least kind of know who I am and what's going on. But I don't think in the long, well, I don't think, I know in the long run this is not a format that is going to be particularly interesting or engaging for a bigger audience. Audiences today want knowledge, understanding, and wisdom right here, right now. So part of the title of the show is Einstein Mother's Daily Microdose. Einstein Mother's Daily Microdose of Health, Happiness, and Longevity. And here's kind of the premise. If you lose your health, it's tough to be happy. And if you ain't got health or happiness, why would you want to live long? So the solution to longevity is health. Because with your health, you can discover your happiness again. And those two, I think, is the ingredient for longevity. But starting with health, it's not diet and exercise. That's the old vehicle. If you want to regain your health, if you want to protect the health of your children, your family, you must start with the 5 core pillars of health. That's it. Got to start there. These are also the 5 core pillars of chronic disease. So if you got chronic disease, you start here. You want health, you start here. Thank you for joining me. And I'm excited to hopefully continue to do the work and refine my practices. And so let's see. Let's see if we can make this work. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for Bella for tuning in. Thank you for the Duties for tuning in. Dr. Kim, my all-time favorite acupuncturist up in the Woodlands, Texas. Thank you so much. Your work is brilliant. And Al McDonald, I'm my all-time, my water mentor. Big shout out to Al McDonald. And who else can I think? Yeah, so one of the solutions to air we'll talk about next week. So I'll reserve that. Okay, I'm gonna give us some sound, play our funky music on.